Have you ever thought about what happens when following the law perfectly still leads to a really unfair result? It sounds kind of crazy, right? But it's a real problem our legal system has wrestled with for centuries. Today, we're going to break down the brilliant solution it came up with, a set of principles known as equity. You'd think laws would be black and white. You follow the rules, you get a predictable outcome. But what if applying those rules word for word creates a situation that just feels wrong? Fundamentally unjust? Well, historically, you can think of the common law like a super straight paved road. It was predictable, sure, but if your problem didn't fit neatly on that road, tough luck. That rigidity could cause some serious injustice. So to fix this, a different set of ideas grew up alongside it, what we call equity. It's less like a road and more like a river that can find its way around obstacles to get to a fair destination. At its core, equity is basically the law's conscience. Now, it's not some separate court system anymore. Its principles are all mixed into our modern legal system. Judges use these ideas to ask a really simple but powerful question. Is someone using the strict letter of the law to get away with something that's just plain unfair? If the answer is yes, that's when equity swoops in. Okay, so let's dive into how this actually works. Our first big idea is all about your own behavior before you even think about asking a court for help. Let's get into a real and honestly, a pretty shocking case from history. A woman murders her husband. So after this horrible crime, what does she do? She tries to claim the payout from his life insurance policy. Now, technically, according to the strict terms of the contract, she was the beneficiary. On paper, the law seemed to say the money was hers. And this is the exact pickle the court was in. Do you follow the contract to the letter and give her the money? Should the legal system actually reward someone for murder? It just feels wrong. And this is where the brilliant clean hands doctrine comes into play. The court used this principle from equity, which basically says, if you're coming to court to ask for a fair outcome, you better have acted fairly yourself. By murdering her husband, her hands were, well, about as far from clean as you can get. The court, of course, refused her claim. So the crucial thing to get here is that the clean hands rule is all about your past behavior, what you did leading up to the problem. It's a ticket you have to have just to get into the theater of fairness. It's not about what you promised to do later, it's about what you've already done. So equity demands that you act fairly, but it also demands that you act on time. Our next principle isn't so much about what you did, but what you didn't do. Equity has this old-school Latin phrase that makes a really powerful point about getting your act together. And what it means is pretty simple. The law helps the vigilant, not those who are sleeping on their rights. In other words, if you think you have a legal claim, you can't just sit on it forever and expect the court to help you out years later. This whole idea is called laches. The best way to think about it is like this. Imagine you spot a small leak in your roof. If you ignore it for 10 years, you can't then turn around and demand your neighbor pay for the massive water damage it finally caused. The law expects you to act reasonably fast. This stops people from digging up ancient claims where all the evidence is lost, witnesses can't be found, and nobody can remember what actually happened. Just like one famous judge, Lord Camden, put it, a court is only moved to act by conscience, good faith, and reasonable diligence. If you've waited so long that those things are gone, well, the court's just going to stay put and do nothing. All right, for our last principle, we're looking at a classic legal problem. What happens when what something is called clashes with what it actually is? This is where equity looks right past the labels to get to the truth. So we've already seen that common law can be super rigid. In the world of contracts, this used to mean that the exact words on the page were everything, even if they were being twisted to create a totally unfair situation. So check this out. There was a case where a landlord wanted to dodge all the laws that protect tenants. He wrote up an agreement that had all the features of a lease. It gave someone exclusive use of a place for a set amount of time. But he sneakily labeled the document a license, hoping that one little word would let him get around all of his legal duties. This really gets to the heart of it, right? Should a judge just be stuck with the labels someone put on a piece of paper, or should they look at what the agreement really is? And of course, equity had the perfect answer. The court basically said, nope, we look at the intent, not the form. Since the agreement acted like a lease, looked like a lease, and quacked like a lease, it was a lease, no matter what the landlord decided to call it. And boom, the tenant got all their legal protections. So, we've looked at a few examples. What's the common thread here? What's the big picture that ties all these ideas together? You see, whether we're talking about having clean hands, or acting quickly, or looking at intent instead of just labels, all these little rules are pushing toward the same big goal: to soften the hard edges of rigid laws and, at the end of the day, get to what's actually just. And you can really boil all of this down to two huge ideas. First, equity will not stand by and let a clear wrong happen without finding a solution. And second, it works by appealing to a person's conscience, pushing them to do the fair thing. It leaves us with this final, massive question at the very heart of justice itself. Equity shows us that while rules give us structure, the ultimate goal is always fairness. And achieving that fairness is a constant negotiation, a human process right at the center of our entire legal system.